Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you what to look for in a shoe if you have plantar fasciitis pain. We want to find a supportive shoe that limits the range of motion and the mobility of the foot bones so there's not excessive stress on the plantar fascia and you have less pain. So if you have pain from plantar fasciitis, follow these steps in order to find a good shoe. You can apply these steps to shoes to test if they're good at the store, or you can go online and follow my list of the best plantar fasciitis shoes by following the link in this video or in the description below. Alright, I have an example of a very good supportive shoe. They don't make these anymore, unfortunately, but there's lots of other great models out there. The first test that we want to do to see if this shoe is good for plantar fasciitis is put a hand in the front of the shoe, a hand in the back, and what you want to do is, it's called the bend test. And what you want is you want to bend a lot right here under the big toe joint, but what you do not want is any kind of flexibility or movement from here all the way to the back. So see how it's moving a lot in the front, but in the back of the shoe there is no movement. You cannot bend it. The second test that we're going to go over is the torsional test. So see how this is very rigid in the back? I mean, in the front it doesn't matter. You can have some flexibility in the front, but in the back, from like behind the toes all the way to the heel, it needs to not be able to rotate at all. Compare this to a shoe that rotates a lot. See, you can wring this one out all day long. It's very, very flexible. But if you have plantar fasciitis, you don't want that. You want complete inflexibility in the back of, like, around the heel all the way to the metatarsals or right behind the toes. The third test that we're going to go over is if it has a very solid heel cup in the back. I cannot squeeze this. I can't squeeze it until I'm right at the tip top of the back of the shoe. This will cradle and support the back of the heel, and that's really good for rear foot mobility. You want to really stabilize the bones in the back of the shoe. Compare that instead to this shoe where if I squeeze it, there's nothing there. There's no heel cup, there's nothing. This one, you could try all day long and it would probably break if you could actually bend that. This thing is solid. So you always need to find that in a shoe if you have plantar fasciitis at first. The fourth test is there enough room inside the shoe to put an insole? When you have an insole in the shoe, you don't want it to move around in the back of the foot, but it can move around in the front, and you do not want it to be crowded in the front of the shoe unless you'll mess with this flexibility. So if you have an excessively long insole and it's jammed up against the front of it, it will not move as easily. But what you do need is enough room for that insole to fit. A wide shoe is preferable. That is the best way to get a very good shoe for accommodating for an insole. The next test, the fifth test, is going to be how much room do your toes have to spread. Your toes need room to splay out with every step. That's very, very important with plantar fasciitis. So what you want to do is look at the toe box. This is where the toes are situated in the shoe. And you need it to have room on both sides of the toes. So what I want you to do is put the insole on the ground or put the shoe on the ground and put your foot on top of either one and see how much room you have for your toes. Spread out your toes with your hands and see that if when they're spread out, that when your body hits the ground and the weight's being distributed and your toes are splaying outward, that they have room to stretch outward. You really need that, because if you don't, the bones and joints are not going to move in a favorable fashion and force is not going to get distributed properly. So you need a lot of room for your toes to splay outward. So that's a very, very important thing. The sixth factor is how you tie your shoes. Do not tie your shoes extremely tight. I mean, it can help, but it's more important to have mobility in the front of the shoe, and then maybe in the back you can tie it up in the top, and so that you have more support back here. But the front of the shoe, you really want it to have loose shoelaces so that it can move a lot in the front. So as you get there, we want more flexibility in the front of the shoe, and we want it to be way more rigid in the back. That's very important for plantar fasciitis. Some other features that we should go over, these are not requirements, but they're pretty smart if you have plantar fasciitis. So all of these things are aimed at reducing pronation, but pronation is a very healthy movement pattern. You need it. It's awesome. Pronation's not bad. But if you have plantar fasciitis, what we want to do is we want to reduce excessive pronation. So all of these features in a shoe are to reduce excessive pronation. And one of the ways that we reduce excessive pronation is to have dual density foam. So what happens is you have a very rigid non-compressible foam on the inside edge underneath your arch, and then you have a very compressible gel or a very soft foam on the outside edge of the shoe. And what this does is it promotes more supination action, and that's opposite of pronation. It really fits the bones so that every time it lands and hits, it's not going to do that. Another thing also to look for is you want it to be completely flat in the back here. Okay, this isn't really a test for a shoe, but it's good to look for. Some shoes, they cut it off on the outside edge, and then they make it flat so there's more surface area so that you can distribute more force over more surface area. And so that is kind of good in some shoes, and you really have to test it out and see how it feels with you, because if you've been wearing shoes with that for a long time, you're going to be used to that. But over time, you really want to have it completely flat in the back. Another thing that people really like with plantar fasciitis is a raised heel just a little bit. This is actually bad, and it causes the development of plantar fasciitis, but it feels really good if you have severe plantar fasciitis and it's degenerative. If you have a shoe with an elevated heel, not like high heels, but just a little bit, people find, because it shortens the calf muscle and it causes less referred pain down to the plantar fascia and quite a few other features, that you'll have less pain. So if you have a heel that's a little bit high, like this is a pretty darn big heel shoe, like that's pretty excessive. People like that with heel pain, so that might help you. So that's an example of a very supportive shoe that holds all the foot bones in place and really does help if you have severe plantar fasciitis. If you add an insole to that conforms to your arch height and it feels really comfortable, then of course you're going to have reduced pain. But you need to understand that these things cause the development of your plantar fasciitis. Wearing shoes, sitting down in chairs all day, quite a few other factors kind of cause the development of plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis usually is not just an injury, like a severe traumatic injury. It is a progressive, slow developmental disorder where it becomes degenerative and starts eating itself, and then that weakness gives rise to the actual pain because things are not working how they should. They can't keep up with the status quo of building itself back up again, and so it breaks down and gets weaker and weaker, and then you start getting pain. So check out my other video on what shoes are good for slowly progressing to the prevention of plantar fasciitis. So after the pain is completely gone, check out my other video. That one will go over what shoes are good for prevention of plantar fasciitis, and that's going to be minimal shoes.